Hi everyone, my name's Pieta Valentine. I've written 2 books, The Resident's Voice and The Resident's Rise, both from a dementia unit. And today's session is on relatives preparing themselves for when a loved one enters a dementia unit. There's a lot to prepare for, and often relatives don't realise how much there is that they need to know and learn and prepare for when they have a loved one entering a dementia unit. So I will outline these aspects here. Now, the first thing is upskilling on the medical notes of the person that's going to be going into the facility. In terms of medical terminology, diagnoses, what's been written in the notes, it's, notes can be a fairly hefty amount of reading, 30, 40 pages sometimes, but it's really important to sort of delve into that and become familiar with that, and all the aspects that have been written about your loved one, so that then when you, especially the diagnosis and the medical terminology, so that when you speak to the nurse or go into the doctor's meetings, you're on a par with them in terms of being able to ask well-informed questions and being able to give well-informed answers. And in that way, you'll get to know a lot more about the direction in which your family member is going, or in terms of what assistance they may or may not need. If you haven't read up on the notes and the medical staff are aware that your knowledge is limited, they will just give you superficial short answers because they haven't got time to be able to explain it all to you. But if it's apparent that you're well informed, they will give you well informed answers, and it helps enormously, both with you being well adjusted to the environment, and also this will help your family member as well. So that can all be preparatory before you go into the unit, getting those notes and reading them. If that medical dementia diagnosis, which is the dementia diagnosis with all the cognition tests and assessments, activities of daily living assessments, that's when you'll get the big pile of information, and that's the information to work through. Now, when you actually go into the unit, there's also other aspects to orientate to. The unit itself, if you haven't been in a medical facility, such as it's not really a medical facility, but a dementia facility. If you haven't been in a dementia facility before, it can be a bit of a shock in terms of, the residents that are there, the routine, the staff, the hierarchy, who does what, what's happening, what's the routine, just the whole, 360-degree aspect of what happens in a unit. If you're not used to it, it can be unnerving. So the best thing to do, really, to learn about all of these things, is just to go in, to be there with your loved one, say your mother, sit there with her and just observe. That's the best way to learn. Just observe. Observe, who does what, who's the who are the charge nurses, because there'll be different ones on different shifts. When the shifts occur, day shift, afternoon shift, night shift, who's the person you can communicate with, which is usually the clinical manager. Who is the carer of your mother? Get to know the main carer. That's very important. Sometimes when she's off duty, then of course there'll be someone else, but there's generally a main carer. Then it's also important to get to know the laundry girls, the cleaners, all the staff actually, because it's part of this family, isn't it? It's a community. So the more that you are friendly with the staff, the more likely they'll be friendly to you and indeed to your mother. Now, another important thing in terms of orientating to the unit is just the schedule itself. When is breakfast? When is lunch? Dinner? Because it can be very disorientating. Well, it will be disorientating. There's no doubt about it, because if your mother's late 80s, early 90s, typically mid 80s, late 80s, and she's lived in her own home most of her life and then comes to such a facility, everything will be different. So that's why whatever you can help and her in terms of orientation, the better. Everything, when is breakfast, what she's likely to be eating, when is lunch, what she's likely to have, dinner, work it through with your mother. Then of course you will be asked to fill out menus, so go through that with your mother too. There's usually often a different menu for each season. And then orientating to the activities that are on in the day. There's often a monthly schedule that's put on, say, the back door of your mother's bedroom. So orientating to that, going through that with your mother, when the various activities are on, which activities does she like? Does she like the newspaper reading each morning? Well, if it's 9 o'clock, to ensure that she's there for that. And say to the staff as well, what activities it is that your mother likes, and she will be encouraged to be there at that time. They'll take her there at that time. In fact, staff are very good with any suggestions that relatives give. Staff go out of their way to go along with that, to follow those guidelines. So it is important to speak up for your relative and what she will enjoy and what's important for her. Now, another thing in terms of orientating to the unit, in terms this time for your mother orientating to the unit, just mention to the staff, if, for example, she doesn't like getting up early and, she's a late riser, well, mention that to her, because otherwise she may be taken out of bed at, 6 o'clock in the morning for a shower. Imagine it before breakfast. Imagine how much stress that will give her when she's used to rising, say, at 9 o'clock and having breakfast leisurely. Just ensure that the staff know for her not to have a shower before breakfast, and even maybe the first 1 or 2 weeks she can have breakfast in her room before she's up to being able to go and socialise with the residents. Now, in terms of adjusting to the unit as from the relative's perspective, another important thing is getting to know the main residents at the unit, especially those that are likely to want to escape. Now, they're the residents who will be banging at the doors and crying out, "Let me out, let me out." Now, if you don't know the main residents of the unit, sometimes what happens is just a relative can let a resident out, and this can create enormous problems, because if the resident gets out and ends up on the highway or the local shopping mall and the police find them, that's terrible for the unit and also for the relatives as well of that relative. So if you know the main residents that are likely to want to get out when you leave the unit, you can recognise the difference between a relative and a resident, and so you won't be letting anyone out. But if you're not familiar with the whole routine and the people, in fact, it's very easy to let a resident out, especially if they're well dressed, well groomed, which many are, and some are younger. So they're often very well presented, so you wouldn't know. So these are all the things one needs to orientate oneself as a relative coming into a dementia facility. If you're better adjusted, if you are adjusted, then you'll be able to help your family member adjust as well. So thank you. That's the end of the session today. I'll leave the link below to the 2 books. Thank you for your views and your likes, and all the very best with all of you who are going on this journey of finding a dementia facility for your loved one. And for both of you, the whole family, actually having to adjust to this new community is a big effort. And so that's why I've done these videos, to try and enable you to be better educated, better informed and upskilled, so that it won't be such a shock to the system, and that you'll be able to, adjust to the place as best as you can. Thank you.